32 is when I decided I would never lie. I was working at Mercedes selling cars. It was as I was leaving Mercedes. And COVID happened, and they laid us off, like a chunk of us off.
Okay.
And so I went on like I was like deep on my soul search. And I had the awakening that you can never lie because it'll corrupt you. So, I mean, that means being honest with people. That means standing up for yourself is what it means.
Yeah. That's not an easy path.
No, it's not. But it is if you know, like, you just have to be loyal to that. Nothing else, you know. And it was a couple years, it was like a year, maybe a year and a half or so after that I discovered about sexuality, how it corrupts people and why it corrupts people, the biology and the science behind it. For several years, like 2 years, I studied into that really deep.
That is super powerful.
Yeah.
That's...
So it kind of goes back to what you were talking about last night with the lust thing.
Yeah, well, I think it's like a really base emotion that we give way too much credence to.
What do you mean? So you think it's a base? Well, okay. Yeah, so... Well, it's such a foundational thing, so... It's like a fire, right? It's a fire that's burning inside of us.
Okay.
And it's always burning unless your ovaries or your testicles. It's a fire that's always burning. And you gotta learn to control it and harness it. You can't try to cover it up. If you just pretend that it doesn't exist and you stifle it and you cover it up, it's gonna blow up, is what's gonna happen. It's gonna explode. It's gonna It's gonna creep out in ways that you don't intend it to. So you have to learn how to harness that energy. And for a man, it's exploited. People use it as a weapon, and that's black magic.
Okay.
When people use your sexuality against you or to manipulate you, that's black magic. And that's basically all that's one of the reasons I have a problem with sales and stuff, is because that's one of the ways that people sell you on things. They utilize that to sell you, and they use it to manipulate men, especially in their desire, and they'll use that desire to sell product. That's black magic. That would follow.
So, where do you feel like on the flip side that women are preyed on with that energy?
How do they get manipulated?
It's just, I feel like on the women's side of things, it's more around like, because men are just so used to looking through that lens of like sexual objectification and sexual objects.
Yeah, right. It's corrupted the
that
women.
To me is like to me it feels like men are just walking around with these glasses on. They can't see you. You know what I mean? Like, I have to fight through that on the daily to be seen as a person, because men think that I want to be told that like what they did fantasizing about me. Like, they think that that's like a compliment to me or something. You know what I mean? And it's just like, to me, it just feels like invasive. That's what I was talking about last night when I said the world is over sexualized and over romanticized, because I think we've put so much predominance on romantic love as a priority. And what I've discovered in my deep dive for the last 6 years is unconditional love and more like tribe and like a familial, like soul family love is to me way more sweeter than I've had in my romantic relationships per se, because there was a time in my life where I would just like relationship to relationship to relationship, and they just felt so like surface level compared to the depth of friendships that I've cultivated soulfully over the last like 5+ years. But it's taking breaking through these paradigm shifts with men who think it's supposed to look a certain way in the romantic, but when we break through that, we hit new, deeper levels of love and connection and depth that I don't think very many people experience.
Well, it's interesting because I think men try to please women and try to go through the motions in order to get women to validate them.
Yeah.
And there's like a breakdown of communication or understanding, and it's an ignorance thing, because the men are probably doing that for whatever reasons. There's deeper to this, but just on a surface level, I think that could be one thing. Is especially younger women, they can't even articulate stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
Like men seem to be more thoughtful and more self-aware and more aware of things like psychologically, and they're not as afraid sometimes. So, but then a younger girl can't really articulate. There might be a communication or there's a breakdown of being on the same page maybe, but which I think would be good to figure out. But I think going back deep, where my teaching has come from is that we are messed up. Men are messed up. If you have sex with your wife, have an orgasm, like when a man has an orgasm, he spills the seed. His seed goes, right? Mm-hmm. That's millions, supposedly. They say millions, right? I'm not a doctor. Like, I haven't looked in the microscope yet.
Right.
But supposedly there are millions of these sperm, right? And when a man lets that go, there's a consequence for that, first of all. So that's just energetically or...
life force.
It's life force, and that's a lot of eggs. Like, that's a lot of seeds. That's a lot of potential humans. That's the power of God. That's the power of the earth. That's where we all came from, is the sperm and the eggs. Like, that is the life force. Boom, like you said. So when a guy loses that, it kills a part of him off. Some part of him dies. And what happens is it multiplies and fortifies psychological elements within the brain, like within the personality. So it adds psychological aggregates, and it complexifies the psychology of the man. So it multiplies and fortifies what are called egos. So egos are, there's never just one. Ego, if you ever hear someone say like, oh, my ego, that's actually wrong, because there's never one. It's always a multiplicity of egos. Like, there can be like 10,000. There can be so many.
I feel that with some things that I believe and feel.
Yeah. And so when a guy does that, it multiplies and fortifies the ego. You think it feels good. You think it takes the pressure off. You think you need to release that. But usually that's just it's actually your body is like used to it. And so it's kind of in this habit of producing it. And then you try to stop it at that point, and you have to literally like reconfigure the whole system. Like you have to train your body to fix that. But it gets messed up at such a young age. So it gets started a lot of times when we're like 10. That's so bad. It's so bad. 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, all throughout high school, whatever. A young man should not lose his seed until he's 20s. Now, this is where the church is so true. You grow up in the church, right? You get baptized. You get the priesthood at about age 12, right? 12 to 14, you're a deacon. 14 to 16, you're a teacher. 16 to 18, you're a priest. You get ready, you go on a mission. You receive the Melchizedek priesthood. You leave for 2 years. If you're chaste this whole time, you come back, you get married, and you have one partner, boom. That's it right there. Perfect. If you did that, you were perfect. Yeah, that's the ideal. I mean, the opposite would be, okay, you're young, you spill your seed at a young age, you get messed up, your energy starts going wacko, your hormones are going wacko, your testosterone's off, right? Your body doesn't regenerate itself, your body doesn't consciousness doesn't even, your brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25 or something in a man. At least 25, if not forever, but...
Yeah, across the board. Any gender, that's the case.
Yeah, and people think 18 you're an adult. Your brain is still trying to form mid to late 20s at least. And then after that too. Learning that's what they call the forbidden fruit. That kind of sex is where you have that kind of a release. So anytime you spill, this is a strong doctrine, anytime you spill the seed, you commit fornication or adultery. It doesn't matter if you're married. Now, some people would disagree on that, right? There's certain levels of what is called celibacy, and some yogis or brahmacharya from these different cultures, they're living different levels of celibacy.
Yeah.
You have white tantra and black tantra. So black tantra is anytime you would spill the seed. White tantra is when you do it and you don't spill the seed. And the white tantra is the only way that you actually kill off those psychological aggregates that form in your psyche.
Yeah, because you're recycling like that life force and like
building that flame. It's like rising it up to be like Christ. Lucifer is the light bearer, right? He's the one who brings the fire. He's the tempter. So when a girl's walking in front of you, like, boom, Lucifer, like right there, you're gonna feel that fire. It's gonna flame up that fire, and it's not bad necessarily if you allow it to. If you go and you just shoot it out, if you follow that temptation enough and you follow that urge to act on it enough to where your body has a spasm, you have an actual spasm and you lose your energy, then you failed. You followed Satan. You went down. Your soul now is going to invert into a different realm, so to speak. So I think that's where it comes from. You have to look at the egos. You have to look at the habit. It's an addiction. And it feels good for like a couple days even. Like a day. It feels good for an hour. It feels good for, I don't know, maybe some guys think it's okay for like 2 or 3 days, but by the time your energy starts to really suffer from that, it's a week after. It's like 2 weeks after. It's like 3 weeks after. It's the next month away that you've lost all that reproductive life force. You forgot about it. Huh?
You forgot that it's linked to that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're having a bad day a week from today, and you think that it was because someone pissed you off today. But really what it was is because you lost your seed. Now your body's trying to replenish itself. Oh, and another thing about that is on the psyche level, it's closely linked. So lust is like the trunk of a tree. Lust is the most important one because it's the trunk of a tree, and that tree has like all these roots that are sinking deep into the ground, and each one of those roots could be like anger or jealousy, gluttony, the 7 deadly sins, or all these different negative psychological forces. But lust is the trunk of the tree. So lust feeds anger, lust feeds jealousy, lust feeds all these other things. So the brain, it's all there. Those the reptilian, all of those negative qualities or characteristics, they're sitting on the same part of the sexual urge. So if you control that, then you control those other things better.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
They pointed out that lust is like one of the lowest vibrational energies. So that makes sense.
Well, so if taking the forbidden fruit is the desire to have the orgasm, if I'm married to my wife, I'm going to be attracted. I want to be attracted to her. If I look at her, if I see her naked, it's going to start the fire, right? If I look at another beautiful person, maybe there is a point where you get to where I don't know. You're going to encounter another person, you're going to feel some type of a fire. But does that mean that you want to start thinking all these bad things? Progressive, I want to have an orgasm with that, right? I think you have to get rid of that. There are different levels of celibacy, though. There are some people, some men who would not entertain any desire They will eliminate all desire. But they are also probably not practicing white tantra, which is what I'm talking about, what you would only do with your wife. And it would be one person that you love. And love and desire are not the same thing. There's a distinction taught there. If you desire somebody, that's not love. Love is charity. It's the scriptures, seeketh not her own. It desire it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Charity?
No, I don't know that.
Let me look it up.
Yeah, it's powerful. That's super interesting that one book that I mentioned that taps us into nature, it's called Anastasia.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. There's 10 books in a series, but the chapter I just listened to was referencing, like, it's about the power of creation with a woman. So it's like this experience, these people made a child, but she's this natural, like, goddess that lives in Siberia that just, like, is like Garden of Eden levels of purity and, like, taps into full natural powers. This book resonates as truth. You can just feel it. But, like, there was, like, a man that came to her and he expresses how it was beyond desire for her. Like, he genuinely, like, wanted to create another human with her. And he had this thought and then, like, blacked out, and essentially, like, they didn't even have sex, but they created a child because it was like a co-creation of intention and beyond this earthly realm of creation and love for each other that created this, like, purity of child. It's just, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's the intention of co-creation. It's the intention of creation together in love that is the power.
Okay. So, on that note, like, when I tell somebody this, they're always like, oh, like, how are you supposed to have a child?
Well, yeah, and it's super interesting. Part of my deep dive, if you look up parthenogenesis, there's been other documented cases in the world, which is like a virgin birth.
Well, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know about that. But
I'm just, it's possible maybe with the highest levels of consciousness that maybe in our quote unquote fallen states we can't even, like, comprehend.
Maybe you're right. I personally I don't really believe that, just because a lot of the stuff I learned from talks about it in a different way. So
maybe it's somewhere in the middle.
It takes a sperm and an ovum to create life, as far as I know, as far as we know. Those need to be present. But what you just said about the desire and wanting to create, that has to be there. White Tantra could be called White Tantra. It could be called alchemy, form of alchemy. But it's where you and your partner have sex, but you don't spill the seed. People are like, well, you can't have babies that way. And to a point, it's like, maybe not. Like, maybe it would take a long time. Maybe it would happen fast, but it only takes one sperm. So when you're practicing that way, it comes through intention. So you're praying to your higher power, like, you're praying to God when you're doing that. If you truly love them and if you want to create that life, then you're literally manifesting it through the spirit. You're not just doing it through animalistic sex. The animalistic sex is the natural kind of, like, you could say the natural, normal way, normal sex or natural man way, where you just do it like the animals. And you're going to create life that way. The idea behind the Gnosticism or the White Tantra or the alchemist is that you create a divine soul through your consciousness, through the consciousness of your partner, and co-creating with God to create that. You bring that into existence.
Yeah, with divine intention.
with divine intention. When your child's born, hopefully you're in a state where you're not full of ego, right? Because if you're full of egos and if you're procreating that way with natural sex, normal sex, then you're going to have a lot of those psychological aggregates, and then your children will grow up and they'll be influenced by those psychological aggregates, and that creates more ego in the children because they're dealing with your ego, so they have to create more egos that will it's combat yours. Yeah, and then they spread it to everyone else too.
I feel like we need to sit like with that for like super, super powerful. That is like powerful. That's so like that makes sense and that resonates because it's like we'll call it like base level sex. You're creating like base level children instead of like intentionally divine intention.
Yeah. You were raised LDS, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this isn't the case with everyone, and there's definitely full range of possibilities. But if you were born from a parent that loved each other and who were trying to follow God, and let's say they went to a temple, they did covenants and do all the stuff that you do in the LDS church, you're in a much more grounded spot. Really, right? Like it might not be it might not have been to the most perfected level because our parents didn't know that, or they weren't taught that. People don't know this. Like my bishop, when I was a kid and I was like, I wanted to ask questions about sex, like he had no idea. He could not have explained this to me at all to this level. You know, he would just be like, oh, well, it says in the scripture, follow the law of chastity. We're just supposed to do it. But if your parents in that situation, it is a much better place than most.
Under the seal, or like, is that what it's called?
In the covenant?
Covenant.
Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty good place to be. But that doesn't mean that if you understand the egos too. I mean, there are people that are in our church that, I would say probably most people in our church, I get scared thinking that people in our church think you have to be in our church to be saved, but I just don't know that that's true. I think, because I don't think God necessarily works that way. I know of Catholics that have had similar experiences too, than what I had to help confirm my faith, and it's like, that's just, let me read this scripture, okay?
Well, I think it's the linguistic things when people say this is the only true church, it's like you're making yourself look like a fool. But say church holds truth, this church holds a lot of truth, like that hits different. You know what I mean? It's
or
just
it's the most true church, but the reason why it's the most true church, in my opinion, you maybe don't like that already, but if it is the most true church, the reason why it's the most true church, because of modern day prophets like Gordon B. Hinckley, who said, whatever church you belong to, we don't have, what did he say? Like, we don't own all truth, or we don't have
like a patent on truth.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever truth you have, bring it to us, and we'll add more to it. That's what he would say.
Interesting.
He would say, like, we accept all truth, so.
Yeah, and see, that's what it comes down to, is truth can be felt. Like, truth is truth. So if you try to say you have a monopoly on truth, you're already making yourself a liar.
Right. Exactly.
But, like, that's why I think, like, being able to expand a little bit and bring some of that in, like, what we're doing in this conversation is super cool because, yeah, a lot of people just kind of park and ride. Like, people tell me I'm too deep, or have, but there's people that seek that out also. And I literally remember in primary being like, why can't I be like Joseph Smith? Why can't I go find truth? You know what I mean? Like, some people just have it in them to, like, knock and you shall receive, seek it shall be open to you, or whatever. Like, some people are just wired that way, and I love that we're different.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So it says here that though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and have not charity, I am become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. Even though I give all my goods to feed the poor, though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. And it continues, but...
Wow. What is this?
What?
What is the scripture?
This is 1 Corinthians 13. And it's got more to it. It's also... It says that in the Book of Mormon, too. They put it in... like in Moroni. I think it's at the end of the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith said that charity, I think it's actually in the scriptures that it says this, it might be in the Proverbs, that charity covereth a multitude of sins. So it's like, you might be you might have a lot of issues. Like, you might do a lot of stuff that would disqualify you or karmically damn you to receiving more blessings, or it would karmic tract payment, right? Where you're paying for sins. You're not doing all the right things. But if you really do have charity for other people, covereth a multitude of sins. One of the things the Latter-day Saints have is they actually do care about people. They know that that's one of the main things, true love. And I don't mean desire, but love, you know?
Yeah, because I think as you expand into these places of like a higher learning, you come to realize we're all one, right? There's scriptures that talk about that, where someone else is just another finger, but we're on the same hand. You know, I read the book Conversations with God that was really powerful, and it doesn't say this in the book, but me reading this book made me realize God is like an octopus. That was my association word. And we're all like the tentacles, where we're all in the same body. We have an ability to acknowledge a higher knowing, but we're all connected, kind of moving as one when we're in our ideal state. So if someone asks me for something, that's another version of myself asking me for something. So why would I not give that?
Yeah, I like that.
And my friend even said it once, you're having a conversation with someone, you look at it like that's another side of your brain, like asking yourself that question, or like, are you fighting with your own brain? Are you fighting with yourself? Or can you realize this is another aspect of me, like bringing something to my awareness? Do I have the ability to be able to look at it like that? And then of course, if we're in that tone, everyone's giving each other everything, because it just goes into one big container of consciousness.
Yeah, it's like when you see something in someone else that bugs you, it's because you have it in you. That's what you're saying, right?
For sure. Like, we're all just going around projecting our things when it's ourselves. But yeah, to work through all of our own garbage, to be able to like see that is, you know, a skill.
Mm-hmm.
And self-awareness to do that inner work. It doesn't come easy per se. I mean, there's levels to this, obviously.
Mm-hmm. It's like a meditation thing too.
But that's what has helped me so much as far as like with the single adult community. And because I'm literally like, the reason I created this class that I do is because I wish when I got divorced, I would have had this resource. So I'm like creating it for a past version of me, and like know that it will benefit others, because I know it would have benefited me. And it's about that though. It's kind of de-romanticizing it, bringing that focus off it as the baseline, and making it about a safe, collaborative community of friendships, safe space to have safe conversations.
Do you romanticizing what?
I'd say the general nature of singles wards.
I went to a singles ward yesterday for the first time in 6 months. It was kind of rough, but it's kind of nice at the same time. Like, there's benefits for sure. But it is a weird place to be in sometimes.
What I've witnessed in it is this is the very reason, this is my theory. Like, the tone that was in our class last night, to me, felt very different than the singles word, probably, right?
Oh, for sure.
And the point that I feel like, because when I first got here, I feel like that is how things felt, but it's like a guilt energy that's almost palpable, because I feel like it's like a guilt from not doing the right thing or not being the traditional Mormon way. It's this layer of guilt, that frosting that's iced on, and then it's just this unworthiness around not being enough, and then this underlying, I have to find a husband, I have to find a, like, it's just this layered casserole of nonsense.
Well, yeah, because when you add in those other elements, like you just said, that's a big part of it. You know, not everyone feels guilty, but I get what you're saying. I mean, people want to connect. They want to get past acceptance, first of all, and then get to an attractive and like a loving relationship. But in there, it's just so, it's a casserole. It's like layers of uncertainty and inability to actually connect with someone.
Yeah, it's like a tense energy. And see, that's why I think you and I were called, and people like us were called into these positions, because I think it's ready for a revamp. And I think the general tone needs to be friendship first, like getting back to our roots of like young women's, young men's, being able to coexist with people of the opposite sex and not make it weird and not low-key be scanning them for like husband material as the first step. I think we have to cultivate a foundation of that, like the show Friends, and they have a stigma, like deservedly, but that's what I think we're changing up here.
Well, part of the reason I stopped going before was because I had conflicts with people, because I wanted to talk about this. And if you don't talk to the right people about stuff like this, it's not good. It's not good. And so you're in a public sphere where I go to your class yesterday, I'm almost scared to talk, because some of the stuff I just told you, like a lot of it, right? That's a snippet. That's like a piece of it.
I totally get that. What I think it takes, and this is what, like, just experientially what I've learned, because my story is I born and raised in the church, got married in the temple, more in like a duty place and like doing the right thing place.
Okay.
And it was just too much for me. So then I left the church. Eventually we got divorced. Then I deep dived into the bitterness chapter. It was around when the church was promoting not supporting gay marriage, and they were throwing money at that. And my boss at the time, I was a real estate assistant, was gay. And so I left the church for a long time. Then in 2016 was my awakening that I had prayed for in 2015. And then I deep dived spirituality. And then a year before COVID, I came back to the church and brought it all full circle. But it took me a lot of years tempering myself and really learning the language again, and being able to speak my truth in their language with a temperance and like a grace and a pace and a tone.
That's hard.
It's a mastery of language for sure. And like I said, it's taken me 2 years of teaching this class where I can finally now get more into the meat of it and have it be well received from the top down.
Most people cannot actually have this conversation, a lot of guys, because it's such a strong... Yeah, it's like sparks and fire. You know, you're dealing with sparks and fire. So you come up and say, most people don't want to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe if they're by themselves, off in the distance, no one's around them, no one knows they're looking at it, no one knows they're listening to it, it might be more well received even that way. But it's kind of hard. Most people can't really handle it.
Because everyone isn't deep divers. Everyone doesn't like to question their truth. Like I say, I like to have you know what I mean? Like I am open to constructive criticism. Like I like to have my thoughts challenged, my beliefs challenged, because like I think I think what it comes down to is because we've done the work, we're founded in our truth, so we don't get like our tree blown over. You know what I mean? Some people, if they're just kind of like surface level roots, then it's threatening to them because it makes them recognize, they could get blown over. And I think the evolution of the church, what's happening is they're basically saying, like, we can't be your whole root system anymore. Like, you have to do the work. You have to, like, you have to create your own roots, or, like, we're letting the scaffolding go off the building. Like, you have to have your own foundation. Almost like we can't be your everything anymore. We can't, like, do it all for you anymore. That's, I think, the flip.
Well, yeah, because there's just too much information out there that's trying to derail it, too. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's more awareness now. There's more understanding now. There's less...
Question things, they have more access to, like... Yeah, so if you're in it... I mean, to me, that's kind of what I touched on last time. Me, I think it's really cool that I have gone out and collected all this other information to bring back, and that most of what I've collected and, like, align with, nothing is counter to anything that's, like, in the doctrine.
Yeah.
Even some things that most people would say, nah. You know what I mean? Like, my first cousin, who was, like, one of my besties growing up, he was a religion professor at BYU, Idaho. And, yeah, I had some personal experiences in my journey around, like, the concept of resurrection and what the pre-existence looks like and what some would call other lives, right? So I remember saying to my mom, I was like, who I need to talk about this with is James. Because it's like, he's probably the only one that can handle my depth, is what it felt like. The next day, he lives in Idaho. I hadn't talked to him in probably like a year. The next day, he shows up at my house because he had remembered leaving his daughter's shoes last time they went to Lagoon and came through Utah, and just showed up at my door.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, and I asked him, I said, I know this sounds crazy. I had this experience, blah, 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 but is there anything in the Book of Mormon that truly contradicts the concept of living multiple lives? And he said, it's crazy that you're asking me this, because about a month ago, I got asked this question by 6 BYU Utah professors, and we had this big conversation about it. And I can honestly say, no, there's not. And so it's just like the way we understand things, the way we associate words and language and our associations and our, like, there's layers in that book.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, it's a very personal journey, and it's like the levels for everyone, just depending on where you're at. And my sister calls our church a cult. She lives in Washington, and
well, it is a cult.
Well, I just pointed out, like, well, for some of these people, he's like more of a, like how I pointed out, there's the 3 level of resources in our library, like Jesus Christ, mm-hmm. the first, scriptures is the 2nd level, and general conference, where it's like some people can't do the scriptures and they can't do their personal connection, but they can, like, okay, this guy told me to do this, I'm gonna honor that. Well, what if those people didn't have that? I was like, what if they would be serial killers otherwise, and that's what's keeping them, like, in society? So it's a good thing, even if it's just that level, you know what I mean?
Well, the cult is an interesting word because, I mean, think of what culture is. So if you think of, like, okay, today a cult means some weird brainwash community where you shouldn't... I don't even think brainwash... See, brainwash isn't even the correct term, because brainwashed, man, you should get a brainwash like every day. It's like a shower. You got to get a brainwash. A brain poisoning, what most people would think of a cult. It's like this brain poisoning where brain control, they give you these propagandas so they can control you, which, I mean, a culture, if you look at the word, I mean, at one time maybe it meant something different. Words change over the years. Usage changes and language changes. And I don't think for the good necessarily with slangs and different abbreviations and stuff a lot of times. But, I mean, cult and culture are like the same word. So, like, the Catholic Church is probably what you would call a cult. Anything where it's like a group of people that believe a certain way. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. You know, you might have a group of people where you all believe that being healthy and your most attractive and helpful and best self, like your most highest, perfected, unified, glorious self is the ideal. And if you all think that, then that's like the culture. It's like a cult or whatever. But I mean, yeah, I guess any time you hear the word cult, it's going to be like, oh, it's going to be bad. But
and I think the root word of like occult is hidden. It's
hidden
like,
knowledge.
So it's just, and I dabble because I've been on both sides of the fence with it, to be honest. Like there were times I looked at it as a cult. Like when I got divorced, I let it drive me out of leaning into the church because all of a sudden I'm single. I didn't fit the narrative in my subdivision in my neighborhood. And like, I think there has been different times. I feel like there's kind of a higher law, right? Universal law that's at play. And I think one of those key components is free will, which was built into our church, like free agency. I do think that there have been points along the line of our church, good or bad or indifferent, where maybe that line was overstepped just a little into the like, you should do this, you shouldn't do this place.
Yeah, no, it probably did. It probably was, but at one point you were I'm being the advocate, the God or the whatever advocate right now. It's the like the counter position.
The counter voice, yeah.
It's well, when you're a child and you don't know anything, you're walking out right into a freeway. And you're just going to walk right out onto a busy freeway. And someone's going to force you. They're going to grab you. And they're going to take you back. But, I mean, yeah, maybe there's some of those points for the negative. But sometimes even then, like the story might be told that, my agency was taken away. But God's way is not our way. There's definitely an opposition in all things. I don't want to just say some people weren't manipulated in a bad way. But sometimes the manipulation could be a good thing, too.
Yeah. And like I said, I think you can argue at different points, at different times, and different histories of how it served and how it didn't. And so ultimately it's about us figuring out what our own truth is and which group we resonate with, which culture. For me, that, like I was saying, has been one of the most exciting parts, is that I can come bring back all this weirdness that I feel, including like, one time I got up and had to talk about like my favorite song in a church talk, and it was like, there's sunshine in my soul today, and I tied it around to biophotons and how they're the smallest ingestible form of light. So we should eat fruit if we want to be like Jesus, because then we're actually eating light. But nothing's really like counterintuitive, right? Like sometimes it's like a little harder to digest, but nothing in that and in the deep knowledge that I've gone out and gotten, nothing is anti what the church says when I go deep dive about it. You know what I mean? That to me is really cool. I can go real deep and weird with things, but to be able to bring it back, and having learned this language and worked so hard on mastering this language of that, we'll call it the LDS narrative, has really served me, and I feel like it's really helped other people be able to receive things a little more digestibly, right? Concepts that they would never venture out to get on their own, but they can hear it in these little ways to plant little seeds. And I think that's actually what the church is craving, is almost like our grandpas built the house and now we have to come in and furnish it. If half the church is single, which is what they told me when I got my calling, and most of those people are inactive because they don't feel like they did it right or fit in, there's a big opportunity for people,
or they don't feel it's true,
Well, I think most times they don't feel it's true because they felt rejected, and so they don't want to pledge to a group that doesn't accept them because they feel they did something wrong, aren't in the cool kids club because maybe they're not married or their marriage didn't work, and so then because of that they maybe got off onto a path of temptation or things that have a hold on them, and then it just exacerbates their not feeling like they belong or they feel like they're worthy, because then they come back to the singles ward and it's the opposite end of the spectrum where people are just so like, but I did everything right and I still don't have a husband. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, there's just a weird mix, but I think there's also a beautiful opportunity for just a more robust conversation. And I think the singles scene is where we can have it because we're a little bit of the misfits and the offshoots, so we get a little more leeway, but we're also on paper representing half the church, so we have to make sure that we're being represented, and these are our concerns and thoughts and feelings, so they're valid. That's what I say. People like kind of holding on to, I almost feel like there's a little, it's not even a war, it's just a little like power shift, power adjustment, like recalibration happening. Because there's some people that are trying to hold on to the old ways. And I've gotten the signs really clearly just in my own personal revelation that it's time to change and evolve it and bring these people into the conversation. And I think doing it in just a really safe way with friendship and wholesomeness, how we were in Young Women's Young Men, is the tone. Less of like meat market, like less focus on just romantic pairings and more focus on friendship-based community.
Okay, I think it would be good to talk about it more. And I think it would be good to talk about a lot of stuff that could be helpful as long as it's true and positive. I mean, I think that some people don't think the church is true, particularly because they just haven't studied it. They don't understand what it means. I mean, in reality, it's all about freedom and like eliminating suffering. Really, that's where I'm at. And yeah, I think we should continue talking about it and bring in other topics and ideas together, and like keep doing these types of things. And then, yeah, maybe keep doing your I'll go to your class or whatever, and we can continue it that way. But I mean, otherwise, I don't know exactly how to change it. Otherwise, like I just went to a singles ward yesterday. And part of me is maybe I'll go once a month, right? Like one time a month, and then I'll stick with my ward, singing in the choir. I like that. It's nice to be in a family ward for a lot of reasons. Because when you go to that ward, it does, like, it may be even like a subconscious thing. Like you go there and you just think like, I'm at a singles ward, like, and I want to find a wife, and the church says that you need to be married and have kids, and like, that's the way to go. And it is the way to go. I think that it is the way to go, but it is hard to communicate with people. It's hard to, like, my beliefs are that the church is true, but it's also that there's different ways to look at it, and it needs to be more diverse. So, like, you having these conversations with me is very helpful because it allows me to, like, put out what I think that men need to hear. I don't know what women need to hear. I don't know how to approach it, because when I try to tell most women this, they can't handle it. Like, they say, oh, well, I don't want to date you because of that stuff that you just told me. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. They don't think it's bad. They think that I said, well, if the prophet would get over the pulpit and he would say this, like, about the sex and that. I was like, if a prophet got over the pulpit and said it, would you believe it then? And they're like, maybe. You know, like, but like, probably, like, but it's not, but for me, so part of me wanted to go up to my bishop or my stake president so that I would have to go have the conversation with one of them and talk about it. And then maybe, like, they would send in the stake president to, like, discipline me or something, and I could have that conversation, and then they would escalate it to where I was, like, talking to someone up above to where we could have that conversation. Because if it is true then we should do it. Like, we should be learning that. We should be open about that. But when I come in and I talk about it, people are ready to freak out on me. You know?
Yeah.
So I like it, at least like having this conversation. There's certain people that we talk about this and it makes sense, you know, and it doesn't blow them off out of the water. I think I know how to help men, but the women thing is different to me. And that is my focus, is like if I could share that with the men. Okay.
As a trade-off, I feel like. And, well, yeah, and that was kind of my point, is, like, my point with that is I've connected with people on what I've found. That's why my channel is called Evolved Mormon Evolution, because I call certain people, like, evolved Mormons. And it's interesting that in this spiritual community, I could feel different light. I could feel if someone was like raised LDS and then was in this place versus someone that was just in this place. And it's a very specific light, and it's different, and it hits different. And there are more of us. And I think it's like, it's kind of like its own tribe that's growing, but I think it's really, really important. My third great grandpa was Thomas C. Ricks, who founded Ricks College, and so I feel like it's like in my blood to like
That's great.
This, because I've kind of had these moments where it's like, why is this my pathway? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it also feels really important. And to me, it's interesting that it's starting in Box Elder County, but it feels significant, like what we're doing and how we're evolving the conversation forward. And like I said, like Dave, the high councilman that was in there, he is like my savior. He is such a support from day one. That's what encouraged me to just be like, all right. And I kept this whole time, the whole 2 years I've been in this, I kept expecting to get kicked out. I kept expecting like to get called in somewhere. Because I'm just like, even though I've tempered it and like really learned the language, like I know some things I say. Like I had the conversation with the state president about the Library of Resources. I told him about a vision I had before COVID. I got a vision where I saw that the church would be changing. I saw a vision of like a cruise ship doing a big kind of arc U-turn, and I saw where there would be like another split off, almost like in polygamy times. And now to me that is the Mormon LDS conversation. But like I could feel, that's kind of what got me to come back, is because I could feel there was going to be changes, and then when I came back there started to be all these changes, and I was like, okay, you know what I mean? I wouldn't have come back otherwise. But I was definitely guided here.
Look on Facebook and it comes at you.